If you want to witness like a truly ruthless shape-shifting conquer, you don't actually need to hack your way through some dense, uncharted jumble.
Right, or peer through an electron microscope at 3 in the morning.
Exactly. You just need to walk past the canned beans and the squeaky shopping carts in the fluorescent lit aisles of your local grocery store.
It really is the absolute last place you'd expect to have your mind blown by biology.
It really is. And, well, that is precisely why we are doing a deep dive into a single, highly specific source today.
Yeah, so we have this freshly published blog entry from today, actually May 5, 2026. It's titled Notes on Gardening Part 885, and it's written by a blogger named Ang.
Part 885. That is some dedication.
Oh, absolutely. And it captures this seemingly mundane moment, just a routine grocery run that somehow escalates into, well, a masterclass on evolutionary strategy.
Yeah, and phenotypic plasticity and just the rather strange ways we humans interact with the natural world.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. Because Ang wasn't, out looking for botanical inspiration.
No, not at all. They had a grocery list. They were operating on total autopilot. We've all been there.
Oh, 100%. But then a plant in the seasonal gardening section just caught their eye.
Yeah, there was a specific visual trigger that literally forced them to stop the cart.
And I want you, the listener, to picture yourself in that mundane grocery store aisle. What stands out to you when you aren't actively looking for anything?
That's a great question. Because for Ang, it wasn't a brightly colored flower or like some exotic fruit.
Right. Ang writes that they were drawn to the shape of the leaves. They noted that they were lobed, almost like the palm of a hand.
Yeah, with fingers stretching out. That description alone is just so vivid.
It really is. I mean, the finger stretching out implies this kind of grasping directional movement.
Yeah, it captures the essence of the plant before Ang even identifies what it is.
And if you put yourself in that grocery store aisle, surrounded by all that artificial light and the hum of refrigerators.
The fluorescent hum.
Right. It takes a highly specific visual anomaly to pull you out of your cognitive tunnel vision.
It really does. And the moment of identification is what really got me. Ang stops, pulls out their phone, and identifies this stretching hand-like plant.
And it turns out to be English ivy.
Right, Hedera helix. And I read that and immediately thought about how we interact with urban ecology.
Oh, sure.
Because English ivy is a classic evergreen climbing vine. I mean, we walk past it on brick walls all the time.
Creeping up oak trees, spilling out of window boxes.
Exactly. It's the ultimate background greenery. And Ang admits in the post that despite knowing the name English ivy, they had never actually bothered to look it up.
Or truly observe it until this exact moment.
Right. It's like seeing a background actor from your favorite movie suddenly step into the spotlight.
Oh, that's a good way to put it.
You know their face.
Yeah.
Because they've been in 100 scenes. But for the very first time, you're actually learning their name and their backstory.
What's fascinating here is that botanists often refer to that phenomenon as plant blindness.
Plant blindness.
Yeah, we tend to view vegetation as just the green wallpaper of our lives.
Wow. Yeah. We really do.
We categorize it as scenery, right, rather than recognizing them as individual active organisms.
So Ang's pause in the grocery store represents this huge cognitive shift.
Exactly. They moved from passively ignoring a background element to actively interrogating a biological structure.
And once Ang identifies Hedera helix, the subsequent reading uncovers the actual biological function of those finger-like leaves.
Which is where the real story begins.
Right, because the shape isn't just a decorative quirk.
Far from it. Ang discovers that the plant is currently in its juvenile phase.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, yeah. In botany, Hedera helix is famous for its extreme heteroblasty.
Extreme what now?
Heteroblasty. It basically means it undergoes a drastic, fundamental change in its physical form as it ages.
Okay, so it literally shapeshifts.
Exactly. And during this juvenile phase, those lobed finger-like leaves are highly specialized tools.
Wait, so it's not just a decorative shape. The plant is essentially using those fingers to grab territory.
Yes. They are engineered entirely for vegetative growth and spatial conquest.
That is wild. I always looked at houseplants as these static, passive objects.
Most people do.
But Ang's research reveals that the juvenile English ivy is operating more like, I don't know, an aggressive tech startup in its early days.
Burning all of its energy to capture market share.
Exactly. Or like a restless teenager just stretching out to conquer the world and take up as much space as possible.
I love that analogy, and the biomechanics of that lobe structure are just brilliant when you consider the plant's objective.
Because it wants to climb, right?
Right. If the goal is to climb a host structure, like a massive tree trunk in a dense European forest, a solid flat leaf might actually catch too much wind.
Oh, and risk getting torn off the tree.
Precisely. The lobes allow for aerodynamic flexibility.
That makes so much sense.
Furthermore, the deeply cut shape allows sunlight to filter through the top layer of leaves down to the older leaves lower on the vine.
Wow, so it's maximizing the surface area exposed to whatever dappled light actually makes it through the forest canopy.
Exactly. It's a pure optimization strategy. Every ounce of the plant's energy in this phase is dedicated to building scaffolding, climbing higher, and outcompeting everything else for light.
And it completely ignores reproduction, right? Like,
Yeah.
there are no flowers, no seeds.
None at all. Just relentless, aggressive expansion.
That is just incredible.
Yeah, that is the defining characteristic of the juvenile phase. The vine produces specialized aerial rootlets along its stem that secrete a glue-like substance.
To anchor it to the wall or the tree.
Right. It is in a state of continuous physiological forward momentum.
But that raises a massive mechanical question.
Which is?
If this juvenile phase is hardwired for endless climbing and territorial expansion, what happens when it runs out of room?
Ah, yes. Running out of map.
Right. Let's say the vine reaches the top of the brick wall, it hits a physical boundary, and just has nowhere left to climb. I would normally assume running out of space means the plant just stops growing, or maybe it even dies back.
Well, you would assume hitting a wall is a biological failure, right? But for Hedera helix, the boundary is the catalyst for its most dramatic transformation.
So, hitting a physical boundary literally forces the plant to mature and flower.
Yes. Ang notes in the blog post that when the English ivy runs out of space, it enters its mature arborescent phase. It completely shapeshifts.
The description of this phase shift is just wild to me. The leaves completely abandon that stretching finger-like shape.
Right, they morph into an ovate form, basically egg or heart-shaped.
And the color shifts, too, from a deep, waxy green to a noticeably lighter hue.
Yeah, and most importantly, it stops producing those sticky aerial roots.
Because it doesn't need to climb anymore.
Exactly. Instead, it starts producing greenish-yellow flower clusters and dark berries.
So it goes from being a creeping vine to behaving like a standalone shrub.
It's a complete repurposing of its biology.
It's like a nomadic explorer finally running out of map, deciding to settle down, build a little heart-shaped house, and start a family.
That is a perfect way to look at it. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, it comes down to a really sophisticated interaction between mechanical stress and hormonal signaling.
Okay, I am fascinated by the trigger here.
Yeah.
How does a brainless vine actually know it has hit a boundary?
Well, the plant relies heavily on thigmotropism.
What?
Thigmotropism. It's basically directional growth in response to physical touch.
Oh, okay. So it literally feels the wall.
Exactly. As long as those aerial rootlets are pressing against a solid surface, the plant's internal hormone balance stays skewed heavily toward vegetative climbing growth.
Oh, wow. So the physical resistance of the wall literally tells the plant to keep climbing?
Yes. The mechanics of the boundary keep it young.
So the moment it crests the top of the wall,
The mechanical feedback loop breaks.
because the newly forming stems are suddenly just reaching into empty air.
Right, they lose that physical contact. Combine that loss of touch with this sudden increase in direct sunlight, because it has finally cleared the canopy, and you trigger a localized chemical cascade.
That is amazing.
The hormone levels responsible for the juvenile traits plummet, and the hormones that dictate flowering and mature leaf development spike.
So the absence of a boundary is what forces the maturity.
Yes.
It's entirely counterintuitive. We usually view boundaries as restrictive.
Right, but for the ivy, the boundary, the surface it climbs, is what keeps it aggressive and juvenile.
And when the boundary disappears, it is forced to adapt to a new reality.
It shifts its entire biological purpose from expansion to legacy.
It decides it's time to reproduce, feed the local pollinators with its flowers,
Yeah.
and let the birds scatter its seeds.
It is a stunning display of biological pragmatism. It invests in physical infrastructure only as long as that infrastructure provides a vertical advantage.
And once that advantage is exhausted,
It repurposes its biological capital. It doesn't waste energy trying to grow a vine into thin air where it can't support its own weight.
you completely change how you view the ivy covering an old building once you understand this mechanism.
Oh, absolutely. You can read the history of the plant's journey right there on the wall.
Yeah. If you see the deeply lobed leaves creeping up the side, You know it's still in its aggressive youth, actively seeking the roofline.
But if you look at the top of the wall and see those lighter ovate leaves and flower clusters jutting out,
You know it has conquered all available space. It has transitioned into maturity.
all of this silent chemical drama happening continuously, and Ang uncovers the whole narrative just by Googling a plant in the grocery store aisle.
Which naturally sets up a very specific expectation for the reader.
Oh, for sure.
After uncovering the profound evolutionary mechanics of this organism, you assume Aang is going to purchase the plant.
It feels like the only logical conclusion to a narrative of discovery. You find something extraordinary, you bond with its history, and you acquire it.
Right. I was fully expecting a picture of the potted ivy sitting on Aang's desk at the end of the post.
But we get to the climax of the diary entry.
And Aang asks the ultimate consumer question, is it worth adding to the collection?
And the answer they provide is a blunt, probably not.
The sudden jarring pivot. I actually laughed when I read the justification.
Yeah, after this deep dive into extreme heteroblasty, thigmotropism, and survival strategies, Aang just abandons the plant next to the cabbages.
So, what does this all mean? After all that incredible research about shape-shifting and survival, Aang just leaves it at the grocery store because it doesn't match their vibe.
That is the entire rationale. Doesn't fit my aesthetic tastes.
I have to be honest, I find it incredibly frustrating.
Really? Why?
How do you respect the resume of an organism that much, only to walk away because it doesn't match the curtains in your living room?
See, I view that decision entirely differently.
Really?
Yeah, I don't see it as superficial at all. I see it as a masterclass in the separation of knowledge and possession.
Oh, okay. Explain that.
Well, in our current cultural framework, we deeply conflate those two concepts. We operate under the assumption that if an object stimulates us intellectually, we are obligated to own it.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the immediate impulse to monetize or collect our curiosities.
Exactly. If you read a book about pottery, you suddenly need to buy a kiln.
Right. Or if you find a plant fascinating, you must become a plant parent and curate it on a shelf.
Precisely. We treat our physical spaces as physical manifestations of our search histories.
Oh, that is such a good way to put it.
What Aang demonstrates is a highly developed sense of restraint.
Yeah.
They recognize that the Hedera helix is a marvel of evolutionary engineering, but they also possess the self-awareness to realize that bringing it into their personal environment served no real purpose.
So they allowed the plant to remain a fascinating subject of observation rather than reducing it to an object of consumption.
Exactly. You're framing it as curator versus consumer.
Yeah. Aang played the role of a scientist in the field. I mean, a biologist doesn't study a fascinating wolf in the wild and then decide they need to bring it home to their apartment.
I hope not.
Right. They appreciate the complexity of the organism in its own context.
Oh.
Aang appreciated the journey of the English ivy without feeling the narcissistic need to force it into their personal collection.
It requires a certain maturity to say, I respect your complexity, but you do not belong in my ecosystem.
Wow. I respect your complexity, but you do not belong in my ecosystem. That is a brilliant way to approach almost any impulse purchase.
It really is. Aang absorbed the lesson the plant had to offer, the knowledge of its juvenile conquest and mature transformation, and left the physical vessel behind.
The intellectual value is fully extracted.
Right. Owning the plant wouldn't have deepened the understanding. It merely would have created an obligation to water it.
That is so true. Looking back at the arc of this single grocery store run, it's actually staggering how much territory Aang covered.
From the simple act of noticing.
Yeah, overcoming plant blindness. To see the stretching, palm-like leaves under harsh artificial lights.
And that observation opened the door to the hidden mechanics of the juvenile vine,
Revealing its relentless, resource-heavy quest for vertical dominance.
which then exposed the brilliant trigger mechanism of its maturity.
The realization that hitting a physical boundary, literally running out of support, is exactly what causes the hormonal cascade that changes its leaf shape, shifts its color, and initiates reproduction.
And it culminated in a blogger's conscious choice to appreciate the biology deeply, but leave the plant exactly where they found it.
It really highlights the sheer density of information that surrounds us at all times.
Every weed growing through a sidewalk crack, every creeping vine on a retaining wall, operates on a complex set of rules and histories that we rarely bother to decipher.
It makes you wonder how many incredible narratives you walk past every single day because you're too focused on getting your errands done. The world is saturated with these invisible stories. They're just waiting for you to pause, notice the specific architecture of a leaf, and look up the name of the organism you've ignored for years.
And, this raises an important question.
Yeah.
Yeah, because the mechanics of the ivy's transformation provide an incredibly potent framework for examining our own behaviors.
Okay, I'm listening.
We spent significant time unpacking how hitting a physical wall alters the plant's biological trajectory, right?
Right. The loss of a structure to climb is what shuts down its juvenile aggression and triggers its flowering maturity.
It shifts from boundless expansion to contributing to its ecosystem.
The boundary creates the legacy.
Exactly. So it forces us to examine our own relationship with boundaries and growth.
Oh, wow.
If an insentient climbing vine fundamentally alters its physical shape, shifts its energy allocation, and changes its entire purpose in life simply because it runs out of space to keep expanding, how might we react to similar constraints?
That is a deep thought.
Right. In an environment that increasingly restricts our ability to endlessly grow, whether that is economic constraint, spatial limitation, or resource scarcity, how might we fundamentally alter our shape and priorities?
Do we continue to fruitlessly grasp at empty air?
Or do we recognize the boundary as a signal to mature, shift our energy, and start flowering in the space we already occupy?
Wow. That is a phenomenal question to sit with. The difference between fruitlessly grasping at empty air and recognizing the signal to mature.
It changes everything.
It really does. Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
We hope this exploration of a simple gardening blog post changes the way you look at the creeping vines in your neighborhood. Keep your eyes peeled the next time you are running errands. You never know what kind of evolutionary mastery is sitting right next to the cabbages. See you next time.